Welcome back for another deep dive. We're always exploring these big ideas, and today we're zooming in, like way in. We're talking about two tiny chemicals in your brain that, believe it or not, have a massive impact on how you connect with the world around you, how you build relationships, and how you react in those, let's face it, sometimes sticky social situations.
And these chemicals, we call them neuropeptides. They're like the directors behind the scenes of your social life, orchestrating everything, those feelings of connection and trust, how you bond with loved ones, even how you respond when things get a little stressful.
So, like a hidden language our brains are speaking. I'm all ears. I mean, I get the basics, but let's be real. I'm no neuroscientist. Can we maybe, break this down a bit? Like, how do these, what were they called, neuropeptides, how do they actually play out in everyday life?
Absolutely. Okay, so picture this. You're giving someone a hug, right? Someone you care about. And you get that warm, fuzzy feeling, like a rush of, well, good feeling. That's oxytocin at work. It's fostering a sense of connection, building trust.
Okay, so that's what's happening when I can't resist those puppy videos online. It's like a hit of oxytocin straight to the brain.
Exactly. Powerful stuff, this oxytocin. And think about it. It floods your system during childbirth, breastfeeding, heck, even just cuddling with your pet. It's like the glue that holds us together, socially.
Okay, so oxytocin, it's the feel-good hormone, the one pushing us to connect, to nurture.
Yeah.
Got it. But hold on, you mentioned TWO, key players in this whole social hormone game. So what about this other one, vasopressin? Does it bring the same warm and fuzzy vibes?
Vasopressin. Well, it takes a bit of a different route. It's not so much about that initial rush of connection. It's more about, think of it like the long game, the commitment, the protection, the stuff that really solidifies relationships over time.
Gotcha. So if oxytocin is the spark, vasopressin is the steady flame that keeps things burning.
I like that analogy. It really captures the essence. Because with vasopressin, it helps you navigate all the, let's be honest, complexities of relationships, especially when things get tough. It's there when you need to defend loved ones, stand up for what you believe in, keep those important bonds strong.
So maybe less about the cuddles and more about those, well, fight or flight moments that pop up sometimes, like when you have to set boundaries, hold your ground.
Exactly. It's about confronting challenges head on. But, it's not always about conflict. Vasopressin, it's there in those quieter moments, too. The ones where you choose to stay committed, to stick it out with your partner through thick and thin. It lays the groundwork for loyalty, devotion.
Okay, this is making me think, though. Do oxytocin and vasopressin, do they work differently in men and women? I mean, you've heard all those stereotypes, right? Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Is there actually any truth to that, like hormonally speaking?
Well, there are some fascinating differences, I'll tell you that. Not about one being better, it's more about understanding how they shape our social experiences in different ways, like women. They tend to have higher baseline levels of oxytocin, just naturally.
Okay, so that's why women are often seen as, I don't know, more nurturing, more empathetic, like the whole motherly instinct thing. Had to have some biology behind it, right?
Well, it's part of the picture for sure. I mean, think about the surge of oxytocin women experience during childbirth, breastfeeding. It creates this incredible bond between mother and child. But oxytocin's influence, it goes beyond motherhood, too. It helps women read those subtle social cues, helps them express emotions more openly, form those deep connections with friends, partners, everyone.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So what about the guys? Higher vasopressin levels, does that mean they're all about commitment and protection? Like knights in shining armor ready to charge into battle?
Not quite that simple. But vasopressin, it does play a pretty big role in male social behavior. Think about pair bonding, especially in those monogamous species, right? Vasopressin is what drives that urge to settle down, build a nest, protect their territory, that whole provider instinct.
It really is like peering into the control room of human behavior, isn't it? But it makes you wonder, are we really just puppets on a string, controlled by these hormones? I mean, do we have any say in how they impact our lives?
Great question. And it gets to the heart of this fascinating interplay between biology and experience, you see. You're not just at the mercy of your hormones. While they lay the groundwork, your experiences, your choices, your environment, they all shape how these hormones express themselves and ultimately how you behave.
So it's like we have these powerful tools, but we get to decide how to use them.
You got it. And the more we understand about these tools, the better equipped we are to build healthy relationships, manage stress, and live those happier, more fulfilling lives.
Now, that's a deep dive I can get behind. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's unpack this idea of hormonal tools a bit more. I'm especially curious about how oxytocin and vasopressin impact the way we deal with stress? Those fight or flight moments, tend and befriend, all that stuff.
Let's dive into that. Because stress, it's a perfect example of how these two hormones, while they're closely related, can have very different effects on your behavior. Think about it this way. When you run into a stressful situation, right, your brain, it releases both oxytocin and vasopressin, but they kind of send you down different paths, like they're giving you two different options for dealing with it.
Oh, interesting. So it's like a choose your own adventure moment for your brain. Okay, I like that. But how do we know which path our brain's taking? Like, what does it feel like when oxytocin is in the driver's seat?
All right, well, imagine you're having a really rough day. Like everything's going wrong, you're feeling totally overwhelmed. Now, if your brain's going the oxytocin route, you're probably going to feel this urge to connect with someone you trust, Share your burdens, seek support.
Oh, yeah, that's totally me. When I'm stressed, I just want to call my best friend. Hearing her voice, it just makes me feel a little bit calmer, like I'm not alone in this whole mess.
Exactly. Oxytocin, it's like having a built-in support system. It pushes you to reach out, strengthen those social bonds, and find comfort in being around others. It's that tend and befriend response in action.
Okay, that makes total sense. But what about those times when connecting with someone is just not an option? Or when the stress feels more like a threat, something you got to face head on? Is that where vasopressin steps in?
You got it. When your brain senses a threat, it could be physical danger or even a situation that challenges your values, the people you care about. That's when vasopressin jumps into action, prepping you to, well, deal with it. It can trigger that fight or flight response, get your heart racing, focus your mind, give you the energy to stand your ground or, make a quick exit.
So vasopressin, it's like the hormone of courage, resilience, the one that helps us face those challenges, protect the things that matter most.
That's a great way to put it. Vasopressin, it helps you set those boundaries, stand up for yourself, and defend what you believe in. It's the hormone that empowers you to, take action when just tending and befriending isn't enough.
I'm starting to see the bigger picture here, but it also raises more questions. Like, if both these hormones are triggered by stress, how do we know which one's going to win out? Is it just like a coin toss?
Not random at all.
Oh.
Your individual response, it's actually influenced by this really interesting mix of your genes, your life experiences, even your current environment.
So it's that whole nature and nurture thing again, which, makes sense, right? Some people just naturally want to reach out when they're stressed, and others kind of become more, I don't know, guarded, self-reliant.
Exactly. And you know what? Understanding your own tendencies, it can be incredibly empowering. Like if you tend to withdraw under pressure, maybe you make a conscious effort to reach out to a friend, a family member, someone you trust. And on the other hand, if you're prone to taking on too much, well, maybe it's time to work on setting those healthier boundaries. Prioritize taking care of yourself.
It's like having a personalized owner's manual for your stress response system.
Right.
Right. Okay, but here's another thought. If these responses are shaped by our experiences, does that mean can they actually change over time?
Absolutely. Your brain, it's amazingly adaptable. Think of it this way. If you're consistently in situations where reaching out for help, it really works for you, your brain, it might start to favor that oxytocin pathway more in the future.
So it's like our brains are constantly learning, adapting based on what we've been through.
Exactly. And that's where things get really exciting when we start talking about the potential to use this knowledge, to help people who are struggling with social anxiety, relationship problems, even trauma.
Okay, now we're talking. This is what I love about these deep dives, exploring how we can actually use these discoveries. So tell me more. What kind of applications are we thinking about here?
Well, one area that's showing real promise is using oxytocin in therapy. Researchers are finding that if you administer oxytocin in a controlled setting, it can help people with autism spectrum disorder. It can help them improve their social skills, their communication abilities.
Wow, so it's like giving their brains a little extra boost of that connection hormone to help them navigate social situations.
Precisely. And it's not just autism. Oxytocin therapy, it's also being explored for anxiety, postpartum depression, even addiction. The idea is to tap into that natural ability of oxytocin to reduce stress, build trust, and promote bonding.
Mind-blowing. These tiny chemicals, they could hold the key to treating so many different conditions. But what about vasopressin? Any therapeutic potential there?
Oh, absolutely. While oxytocin's getting a lot of the attention right now, vasopressin is also being studied, for its potential to help people regulate their emotions, manage aggression, even strengthen relationships.
So we're talking about like fine-tuning the commitment and protection dial in our brains. I love it. But with all this talk about hormones, it makes you wonder, how much control do we really have over our own behavior? Are we all just slaves to our biochemistry?
That's the age-old question, isn't it? And it's one that science is still working on, trying to fully understand. But here's the good news. Your biology, it plays a role, but you're not just a puppet. You have the power to make choices, develop coping mechanisms, and build a life that supports your well-being.
So it's not nature versus nurture. It's more like this intricate dance between the two.
You got it. And when you understand the roles of oxytocin and vasopressin in that dance, well, you get a deeper understanding of yourself, your relationships. It's like having a secret decoder ring for human behavior.
Okay, I love that metaphor. But before we go too far down that rabbit hole, let's bring it back to, the real world. Knowing what we know now, how can we actually put this knowledge to use in our daily lives?
Great question. It's something I think about all the time. And honestly, I think the key takeaway here is it's awareness.
Right.
Really, just start paying attention. How do you feel? How do you act in different situations? What sets off that stress response? How do you find comfort? How do you interact with the people around you? Do you kind of isolate yourself when things get rough, or do you reach out? Are you good at setting boundaries, or do you have trouble saying no? Just notice those things.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I can already see how just being more aware of those things could be, like, super insightful. But okay, let's say you start noticing some things you don't love, some not so great tendencies. Like, what if you realize you're always putting everyone else first, or maybe you get overwhelmed really easily in social situations? What then? What's the next step?
Well, once you've got that awareness, you can actually start making choices, conscious choices that support you, that support your well-being. Like if you realize that connection is a big thing for you, being around people, then make it a priority. Spend time with your loved ones, nurture those friendships, find ways to connect with your community. Even small things, little acts of kindness, they can make a difference.
So it's like we can create those oxytocin moments,
Right.
right? On purpose.
Yeah.
I love it. It makes those warm, fuzzy feelings seem a lot more, within reach. But what about the other side of the coin? What if you realize you're always on edge, always feeling like you need to protect yourself? Does that mean your vasopressin's in overdrive?
It could be. And if that's the case, well, you got to find healthy ways to manage that energy, that protective energy. Maybe it's exploring relaxation techniques, meditation, deep breathing, things that calm your nervous system down. Or maybe it's setting some firmer boundaries, learning to say no to stuff that just drains you.
So it's about finding that sweet spot, that balance, right?
Yeah.
Between connection and protection, taking care of ourselves, but also standing up for ourselves. I'm really starting to see how this, understanding these hormones, it can help us, fine-tune how we deal with life, all its ups and downs.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that both oxytocin and vasopressin, they're essential. They're not good or bad. It's more like they're two sides of the same coin. Working together, helping us navigate all the messy, complicated stuff that comes with being human, helping us thrive, even when things feel, overwhelming.
Wow. This has been such an incredible deep dive. Honestly, I feel like I have this whole new perspective on what makes me tick, what makes the people around me tick. Like you said, it's a secret decoder ring for human behavior. But before we wrap things up, one last question. What's the one thing you really hope our listeners take away from this conversation?
Empowerment. I want them to feel empowered, to pay attention to their own, internal signals, their hormonal cues, to make choices that support them, that help them thrive, and to see their relationships, through this new lens, a lens of understanding, compassion.
Beautifully said. And yeah, I think this deep dive has definitely given us all, myself included, a lot to think about. So to our listeners, until next time, keep exploring, keep connecting, and you keep those oxytocin and vasopressin levels in check. We'll see you on the next deep dive.